everyone. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Doctor Suit. We are Mohit and Sharan, and today we have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Das, who's the LLM tech lead at Roche Pharmaceuticals. Dr. Das is an engineer from India's top universities, IIT Kharagpur, and he has applied AI and machine learning into healthcare diagnostics to really help healthcare professionals. His PhD work really revolved around helping the field of respiratory medicine and also revolved around healthcare technologies. And Dr. Das has co founded a software company or a spin off that has been used by several pharmaceutical companies around the world as of now. Currently, he's the LLM tech lead and at Roche Pharmaceuticals, specifically in the information systems division. Dr. Das, it's a real pleasure to have you here today. How are you doing today?
It's really nice to be here. I'm doing really good and nice to meet you guys, Sharan and Mohit.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, Dr. Das, I was very curious about this question. You're actually leading a very stressful division of Roche Pharmaceuticals, and we know generative AI is revolving
Yeah.
around the world. So, how do you really balance your work and life in terms of what do
That's
you
a
enjoy?
very good question. Actually, first of all, a small correction. So there is no such thing as division. What I'm leading is a small team of NLP engineers,
Okay.
and what we are doing is we are trying to develop LLM-based features for the different products in our portfolio, uh, and you can check out. So Navify is the brand name which Roche Information Solutions market all its products under. We commercialize different digital software, and for a few of this software, we are working on LLM-based features to improve to deliver more value to our customers. So yeah, indeed, it's so how my journey started was I initially was involved in doing NLP projects. Uh, and it was back in 2022 when I joined here. But then I think end of 2022 when ChatGPT came into the scene, and suddenly there was AI became like really mainstream. Earlier, it was kind of there. It was kind of used passively. It was kind of used as say recommender systems or some machine learning algorithm that is working in the backend. But now, when ChatGPT came into the scene, it became forefront. Instead of these systems being passive, people were actively engaging with it, and that is how there was a tremendous interest in the world and also in our company. So there are a lot of many use cases that have emerged, and that has been really keeping me busy. So I'm really thankful that I have this really cool opportunity to work at the frontier of this evolving technology, very fast evolving technology. And I try to learn as much as possible, about how to apply these technologies in a safe and secure manner in the setting that we operate in, which is a clinical setting. Uh, yeah, and it's sometimes it's a bit challenging. There are long there's a really increasing backlog of projects that I have seen that is growing now because there's a lot of interest from different product teams who would like to improve their products and with these new Gen AI based features, and that is why I'm trying to do my best to balance my
Yeah.
personal life. Of course, I try to, I try to follow my hobbies like playing badminton or going for hikes in the weekends, so that kind of stuff. But these days, I can see like my free time is shrinking a bit because I also do a lot of side projects. And for example, I also believe I also trying to build a platform to help uh, educators to teach students better. So that is again another passion project of mine. So this has been keeping completely busy. And the common underlying thing of all these things is AI, which is my one of my passions.
Okay. Okay. That's very interesting. So, you have been involved in a lot of projects. I can see that. And there's very less free time remaining, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I'm not very happy with it, but I try to squeeze in some time. Uh, Try to prioritize my family first. Like otherwise, these days I have been making my wife pretty upset, and I don't want to follow this for a
Yeah.
longer time.
Yeah. And one more question I had was, so you were, I mean, you started as an engineer back in IIT Kharagpur, got into AI and ML. How did you really get into healthcare, and what really fascinates you about healthcare and AI that not other industries catering towards as of now?
Oh, actually, that's a very interesting question because I I have an engineering background. I actually did my engineering in a field called ocean engineering, which has absolutely nothing to do with healthcare. I know back then when we were kids, we were just following what everybody was doing. No, IIT, like let's get into IIT or whatever. Like just get into there and you will figure it out. So we had that side of mentality, which I'm not very proud of now. But anyway, what happened was over the period of years, I started realizing that this is not something, where I could create an impact through my work. So I actually started doing some serious soul searching, looking, trying to learn a new set of skills, trying to learn, trying to find my own path into a career that could provide more meaning to me in my work. And luckily, uh, in 2016, I found an opportunity as a PhD researcher, and my PIs, my investigators were kind enough to, who are also clinicians, by the way, were kind enough to recruit me, despite my background as a complete engineer. And what that opportunity gave me is to learn everything about healthcare, clinical care, and also machine learning as well. So now I'm quite happy that I was able to make my way into this field, and I'm quite satisfied right now. So,
Yeah. So what we had realized in the past few years, right, the trends were like this: Amazon, Google, many other companies are actually getting into health. Even Walmart got into health tech. But now they slowed down on this. So there might be some major gap that is still missing. People are still trying to figure out the right sweet spot of intersection of AI and healthcare as of now.
so I think uh, the big tech companies have figured out where the sweet spot is, based on my observation. Uh, in fact, healthcare is there is a huge opportunity, especially in healthcare, because if you look at it, almost 80 to 90% of healthcare data is stuck into healthcare records. Uh, and if you add EHR to the mix, which has been uh, hugely problematic for HCPs to use. I mean, you guys yourselves are uh, going to be clinical residents, I guess. So you will see how difficult working with an EHR is. How instead of these systems trying to reduce your administrative burden, they tremendously increase it, which is actually one of the leading causes of burnout among HCPs. And what these big companies have realized is now you can bring these advanced Gen AI technologies, integrate it with electronic health records, and try to reduce the administrative burden as much as possible. And that is where that is has been one of their entry points into this healthcare market. If you look at some of the partnerships between Microsoft and Epic, Cerner, what they are trying to do is essentially automate many of these mundane repetitive tasks that a clinicians need to do when they're engaging with an electronic health records. And the reason it's a sweet spot, because these are often not considered as they are considered outside the regulatory purview, so it's a slightly lower barrier of entry. And uh, that is where these companies are trying to break into this domain. There are a lot of other similar companies, especially AI-based AI startups, which are trying to do uh, speech to text transcription, especially when a clinician is interacting with a patient, it's transcribing in the backend and then giving you a summary, which has been traditionally a very uh, yeah, laborious task, I would say, but now it's trying to again solve this type of uh, administrative burden. So uh, the current trend is now where these companies have realized that there is an opportunity to solve all these repetitive mundane tasks with AI, and that is where they are trying to. That is how they are trying to break into this field for now. But I can see where this is going into. So that is the first level. Then the second level would be they would try to come up, develop algorithms which would provide diagnostics or clinical insights. Then it will probably be considered as class one medical device, kind of low risk medical device, but who knows what will happen. A, give a prominent example would be what Google is trying to do with MedPalm 2, which is one of their flagship medical LLMs, where uh, they are doing a lot of good clinical studies with it. They have shown that these models are almost on par, or at least not, or even if better than clinicians in terms of rephrasing, summarizing text, extracting information from like video records, uh, kind of like a needle in the haystack problem, trying to solve these type of problems. So it's actually it's the capabilities are increasing, and I'm pretty sure the next step would be uh, developing like clinical decision support systems using these as the foundational technologies. So that is where see the current. That is where I see the current trends are going to.
I think this kind of reminds me of the conversation Mohit and I had with one of our previous guests, Mr. Viren Shetty, and he talked about. So he's the VP of Narayana Health, and he talked
Okay.
about all of these various use cases of Gen AI, and what you said, speech to text transcription, all of these things, and how they're slowly and slowly like adapting and sort of, and you're seeing physicians use these things on a day-to-day basis. And so it's an exciting space. But I think before we really dive into our podcast, I think one of the things both Mohit and I would really like like for you to do for us is, can you explain to us in a very simple way what exactly is a large language model? Because an LLM, from what we understand, LLMs are what the entire text-based artificial intelligence boom is based on. And
Yeah.
everybody's throwing these words out. And I think we both of us and majority of people outside of the engineering circle have a rudimentary understanding of what they are. But
Mm.
if you can kind of give us like an Eli 5 version of it, maybe like a short Eli 5 version of what exactly an LLM is.
Yeah. Mm. As of now, the thing only
Yeah.
it's on ChatGPT. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. LLM, I think s- at the foundation, it's a model. It's a model that has been trained on lots of data, like lots and lots of text data. At least the models that I'm referring to are models like GPT 3.5 or 4, where it's a large language model. Uh, So these models have been just to train what the next word should be based on the past sequence of like a past sequence of words. So that is called
Interesting.
this problem is called the next token prediction. Uh, so that is it. That's at the base. That is how this model was trained. Say, for example, it was you take all the Wikipedia corpus and you give a first couple of sentences from a large corpus, and then you ask the model to predict what the next word will be.
Hmm.
What it does is it, based on the most probable word on what it has seen in the past, it will try to predict.
Right.
That is absolutely what's happening at the very foundation. But
Okay.
what is most interesting is when you scale the size of the models. I mean, there was nothing new. I mean, this was done since the last 20 years, the
Yes.
problem of next word prediction. It was pretty common. But what has happened recently is when you scale the size of the models to like more than billions of parameters, uh, very smart characteristics emerge from this, which is
Right.
still a bit unexplainable. But then it is something empirically people have observed that more capabilities, deeper reasoning capabilities have emerged, deeper logical capabilities have emerged when you scale the size of the models. But at the base, it's doing just what it is doing is
Pattern
predicting the
recognition.
next word, giving a set sequence of words. What is the most likely word that will come after it? Kind of like
That's it.
your
Okay.
autocorrect. You know how when you
Right.
use type a couple of words, the autocorrect, it's very loosely similar to that. Uh,
So
In fact,
again,
autocorrect is also based on a very
yeah,
simplistic machine learning models now, that what I know now. Yeah, so
but
that
that
is
is like,
essentially.
this is something that like neither Mohit or I don't think I've ever come across this explanation of what an LLM is. So thank you.
Yeah,
I think
because whichever engineer I've interacted with, they said LLM, LLM, LLM. They didn't explain me what is LLM. I Googled, it was like a segment of deep learning, if I'm not wrong.
Yes,
Uh,
if you look at the ontology, so at the base is machine learning,
yeah,
deep learning is a subset of machine learning, and large language models is a further subset of deep learning. So,
yeah.
uh,
One follow-up question I had is you mentioned that LM is trained on billions of parameters, and we can't explain every prediction that is there. Doesn't that really become a gray area in terms of regulations? Because in healthcare, you need to explain what is happening and why it's happening.
oh, absolutely, that is one of the biggest challenges we ourselves face. Like, I mean, that is, it is also, it has also, it's also now come into the European laws, for example, where you are supposed to explain the rationale, behind the prediction. Uh, Indeed, it is a bit challenging because you cannot simply comprehend this really large space of parameters, how they are interacting among each other to produce a given output. There's simply no way that our tiny human brains can comprehend all that.
Yeah,
Uh, but what is also funny is that uh, what I have seen is when these large language models are producing an output, and if you ask like a follow-up question, what was your rationale? It's able to give you like a convincing, sometimes somewhat convincing that how it arrived at the output that it gave it to you. And
it
then the
seems
question is like, what is explainability? And if you are able to, so yeah, then the question is how should the user look at explainability, right? Is that explanation good enough for you, or what would you like to know? Would you like to know how the different parameters have interacted with each other? Traditionally, uh, when we use like very simple linear regression models, it was fairly easy to understand like which parameter contributed most to the output. That is the simplest way of interpretability. But with LLMs, it's impossible to provide that type of interpretation. So
yeah, yeah,
I
I
think the
totally
LLMs can give very good. It's able to support its output. Let's just say that there's a technique called chain of thought reasoning.
Mhm.
So, and I think most of these uh, AI labs have now ingrained these chain of thought reasoning into these models. So what it means is that before producing an output, think carefully. The LLM is able to, it's somehow trying to process internally, whether the given output uh, answers the query in the most appropriate way or not. So
but is that a
yes,
black box
so
though? Is that a
it is
black
still a
box?
black box. It's a black box, but it's a black box for sure. It's a black box. So
Okay,
a linear regression model is not a black box. For example, you
right.
can open it up and see which parameter. Whereas
Yeah,
here, it's a black box because you simply, first of all, in for these large companies, you don't even know how many models are working, right?
that's true. That's true.
And then
That's true.
even if you zero it into one
That's
model,
true.
you simply cannot figure out the interactions between all these different billions of parameters. So it's a black box, but still it gives you a convincing justification for every output it produces. And then the question is like, uh, is this enough for you? All right, how deep should you go? I mean,
I think
yeah,
sorry,
go
yeah,
ahead.
I think that's when the concept of human interaction with LLMs becomes a very important thing, where although the LLM is giving you a convincing answer, you as a human should be very unbiased enough to judge whether that convincing answer is convincing, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's up to the human, that is, to judge whether this output is correct or not. And we need humans in the loop, because LLMs are somewhat notorious for producing hallucinations, which are, by the way, reducing quite a lot, especially if you define the context of your conversation, pretty well. But we definitely, it's up to the human to decide uh, whether the answer produced is beneficial or not. Uh, yeah.
Yes. Yes. I totally understand that. But Dr. Das, I had a really, both Sharon and I had a very curious question. So you are like the perfect bridge between engineering and medicine, right? You understand healthcare completely well since you have worked with several practitioners.
Yeah.
But in the future, what challenges you see from a clinician's perspective and from a technical perspective when it comes together from both the ends?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up. I mean, I do agree that I have always worked in an environment where my I would collaborate closely with a clinician. Uh, so there has been the collaboration has evolved quite a lot. Earlier, when I was doing my research or when I was working in a traditional machine learning application, the way the collaborations would look like, you do something, you get feedback, you do again something, you get more feedback, and then you try to improve your application or you try to improve your research. Uh, but now with LLMs, the barrier to entry for non-technical people who probably are not well adapted at coding has reduced considerably. So what you need to do is just, you can interact with an LLM like in plain text. So what that means is the clinician themselves are now part of the team. So what the engineer has to do is develop processes or methods wherein the clinician can uh, experiment themselves with different prompts. Often these prompts would have to infuse a lot of medical domain knowledge, to get the correct output. And then the engineers have to then somehow use these uh, experiments to their advantage and try to push them into the final product. So this collaboration has become much more closer. Earlier, it was still a bit separate, but now they can work together as a team. So that is how the evolution of this relationship looks like today. And this is gonna keep getting better, in my opinion, where there will be even more collaboration. In fact, the engineer now has also the opportunity to learn more about
Right.
clinical domain, which earlier they would neglect, or something they
Yeah,
would feel it's not necessary for them to learn. But I think has been a big plus points where because the clinicians often themselves are also the users of these products, right? So
for sure.
they can directly get in this user's perspective. So when you are making your products like customer centric,
Yeah, so
because
users can give you
our products are
feedback.
mostly, yeah, they
So
can give
user,
directly feedback.
right.
Exactly.
And more importantly, I think it's easier, like with the current technologies in play, I think it's gonna be much easier for like a physician who has clinical context to like contribute to developing models like clinically rather than an engineer trying to learn like medicine and then going into
Yeah,
it because medicine is so contextual, right? It's not,
exactly.
I think there's a line from some movie that science is best guess.
Mm,
It's not math. Science is
mm.
usually approximating things, and there is so much so much importance laid on opinions and what you think is the best explanation. And
Yeah,
I think physicians kind of train themselves their whole lives for that. So
yeah.
if they're the ones involved in these processes, I think nothing better. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. If physicians are themselves in these processes directly, I think
That's the best, right?
it is really beneficial. Yeah,
Loop.
I think.
Right. So moving
Mohib,
on.
you asked
Sorry, go.
another question, like, what was the second part of this?
Yeah, the second part, the challenges from a integration with the clinical settings as of now, or barriers to entry, both clinically and technically.
Oh yeah. So what are the barriers? This has been, so what I mentioned was the collaboration has improved, but of course now I can highlight some of the technical challenges and also uh, somewhat clinical challenges as well. So technical challenges still uh, it relates to evaluation, validation. Often it's healthcare data is hard to come by, and so of course scarcity of healthcare data has always been the biggest challenge, and you can now compound that. You can add to the fact that validation of free text is not so trivial. You would always need a human in the loop. Earlier, this was not the case when your outputs are like, say, binary or uh, some kind or quantitative, right? It's very easy when your outputs are quantitative. It's fairly straightforward to validate. But with free text, there are more nuances, and that has actually one of our biggest technical challenges. Like when we are updating our systems, when we are uh, trying out new things, what would be the gold standard for validation? Because every time we're making changes, the gold standard is often the human eyes, but it is almost impossible to have a human validating, like, say, tens or hundreds of documents each time you're updating. So that is now the biggest technical challenge. We have tried to sort of circumvent around this problem, like, for example, using uh, other LLMs to validate, like a lower capable LLMs of the output, that kind of stuff. But again, this won't be the gold standard. This would still be somewhat of a loose validation, but
Mhm.
nonetheless, validation is somewhat challenging. Validation also in a when your models are in production. So how do you know the models are performing well? Because it's just text, right? So
Yeah.
again, live
I think
monitoring
so.
of the models is also challenging.
I think so soon regulatory frameworks will be developed in every
For sure.
country, really embracing it. Specifically, UAE and Saudi, they're embracing generative AI. So they're making their own regulatory framework. Europe, although it's creating its own regulatory framework, I expect a slowdown towards AI
Yeah.
companies coming into play. But yeah, Sharon, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think something you just said right now about evaluating the LLMs, right? So I think, can you like give us some metrics? Like what exactly do you use? Like how do you evaluate whether a particular LLM is better or worse? Like yes, we understand you're going to compare it or
Mhm.
compare it to something, but then specifically, like what are the different metrics that you're using, and what are certain trends that you've seen over the last few years that you feel that might be concerning or they might be encouraging? Like one of the things that both Mohit and I see is how rapidly these things are getting better. But then, are there any trends or any other trends that you've seen that are either concerning or um,
Yeah,
encouraging?
sure. So let me answer the first part of your question,
Yeah,
like what when I say validation, what exactly it means.
yeah,
So to give you an example, let's say I have to summarize few records of a patient, like clinical notes or something of that sort, clinical notes or uh, whatever, lab reports, what
right,
have you. Uh, so then, say if you are implementing a LLM that generates summaries based off these patient records. So how do you validate these summaries are uh, let's just loosely use the word correct. Okay. So
right.
again,
Okay.
when you say correct, what does it mean, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now what some studies have proposed, for example, to check whether a summary is valid or not. I think the valid word is much better here, much contextual. So
Correct.
some studies have suggested to validate summaries based on three parameters. For example, whether the summaries are comprehensive or not,
Mm.
if it captured all the key pieces of
Data points.
information in these records or not, then whether they're concise or not, because ultimately it's a summary. You cannot produce like couple pages long documents, because that defeats the purpose of a summary.
For sure.
So, and the third is whether the summary uh, fabricated any new pieces of information or not, which is again hallucination, or you could
Hallucination.
say
Mm.
correctness. So correctness, conciseness, comprehensiveness, these are some criteria to validate summaries. Again, these are quite subjective, this criteria itself,
For
so you
sure.
would need a human eye. And that is where the challenge is. How could you, like, you cannot have a human to, do a
Be completely
questionnaire. Usually you
unbiased.
would have to
Yeah.
do a clinical study and then ask them to rate them on a Likert scale. Not possible all the time. So these are the type of challenges
Mm.
I often come against in my day-to-day work. Uh,
And when it comes to implementing them, even that's a challenge, right? If it's not validated, how can you implement it?
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That is how, for example, if you are going to an user, if you are going to a customer and would like to demo it, and the first question they will, how did you validate it? And if you
Right.
haven't validated it, so
It's going to be an issue.
but we do mention, like in our, we try to make sure that we do validate with whatever resources we have. We make sure that the validation is upholded
If
to
you
the
if
high
you can give us
standards.
an
Yeah.
example of a potential solution that you created and how did you really validated it towards the end? Just a very brief thing.
Uh, yeah, I cannot like get into the details of the
No,
solution
no,
because
no,
it's still in a
brief.
pre-market solution. But
Yeah.
uh, this is the solution. The problem that I mentioned is something that I've worked on. How,
Mhm.
for example, if you have to generate summaries and these are, how would you validate? In our case, we actually have had internal human experts who helped us validate these summaries. We conducted a full clinical study, like a mini clinical study with a like say 50 to 50 notes, 50 patient sample reports. Quite a tedious study though, because you have to go through 50 patient samples with a lot of, each
Right.
patient also has multiple records, going through all of them, rating a record correctly is
Right.
not possible all the time. So
Correct,
that is
correct.
why we have been exploring now, can we use uh, another LLM to do the same? Of course,
Mhm.
it will be a very loose validation, but what I'm also excited about is that studies have shown that LLMs are capable of producing summaries at a level on par or even better than human experts.
Right.
And these are the type of studies that are sort of shifting the needle for me to go towards more of an automated way. Something in
Mhm.
traditional software development, we would use some sort of tests, right? So
Yeah.
we could implement these type of processes as tests before we put out into production.
And what I feel is also scaling in terms of LLM will become debatable eventually because of the increasing cost, number one, in training an LLM, right? You need
Hmm.
a lot of preclinical data or something. How do we capitalize on that? Another thing, what I feel is to really generate a business opportunity in LLM, specifically in the field of generative AI, in the field of healthcare. As of now, we can only tap onto the administrative side of medicine because that's where a lot of automation, revenue
Yeah,
cycle management can come into play. But now, when it comes to the clinical perspective,
yeah.
that's where it becomes super debatable. There are a lot of LLM companies coming through. How what do you see is the trend, and how do we capture the low hanging fruits in the field of healthcare as a whole, a broader perspective?
Okay. Could you repeat the first part of your question because you had this
Oh,
slightly this.
yeah, yeah. So my question is basically, how do we really capture the low-hanging fruits when we're
Okay,
entering
okay,
the field of healthcare, in the perspective of LLMs?
okay. Yeah, sure. So the lower hanging fruit is what I talked about, was are those admin tasks which can be
Right.
easily automated now with the help of LLM. But the next frontier is definitely getting uh, into a stage where these LLMs are also providing clinical insights or diagnostic insights, and these are not as straightforward because when you are claiming that your model can diagnose diseases based on your unstructured healthcare records, you would need to produce evidence for it, first of all. Yeah,
Mhm.
you need to conduct clinical studies for that. And there's also a regulatory cycle that would come into play once you claim that these can provide uh, some kind of diagnostics insight. But small scale clinical studies have already shown the benefit of such systems. For example, you can now uh, predict the risk of readmission. I think there was a study done last year that was published in Nature Medicine, where the authors predicted the risk of readmission using LLMs, and which seemed to perform better than the traditional statistical models that they had. Uh, there are similar papers where a team tried to predict what the next probable event would be based on the last previous set of events. For example, whether a patient would have an adverse event or not a couple of days down the line. So this again, it's a problem of forecasting, but they did use LLM. So the trend towards this personalized prediction, it's quite strong. There's a lot of motivation to do it. A lot of
Yeah.
health tech companies are actually uh, investing into going into that direction. Uh, as
Okay.
personalized medicine has always been the holy grail of healthcare.
Yeah.
And
Correct.
if you can somehow figure a outcome based on a person's innate characteristics, I think that is something uh, I don't think
That's very
LLMs will be able to solve, because you cannot simply rely on text data, but you would also need to ingest of like your physiological uh, or even like genomics data. So ultimately, there is a trend towards getting into multimodal models. I think there are companies which raised quite a lot of money in France called BioOptimus. I'm not sure exactly about the name. We are actually trying to do this, like integrating different layers of data to provide that personalized healthcare prediction. But yeah, that's still a few. We're still a bit far ahead to reach that stage.
But this raises a very important question. Personalized medicine, would it make it more expensive, or would it make it more cost effective?
Uh, Personalized medicine, of yes, it's expensive for now. When you are like, probably the amount of compute that will go into to infer a personalized trajectory for a person would be tremendous, I guess. But at the same time, if you remember, the cost of genome sequencing was incredibly high when when
Right.
what is that
Yeah.
Illumina launched their
Lumina and
machines.
23 and Me, I believe.
Yeah,
Lumina.
20 it was quite expensive. I think it was some tens of thousands of dollars, but now it's less than
Very
like
true.
500 or $100. I'm not sure exactly, but that
100.
there has been a lot of technological breakthroughs have happened. What I am trying to emphasize here is that the cost will of compute will always come down. Even in the last 2 years, if you look at uh, the cost of the APIs from OpenAI, they have gone remarkably down. For example, GPT 3.5 was for example, GPT-4o, which is the latest release, its cost is almost 50% lesser than a
Yeah.
Mm.
GPT-4s. So compute will always keep getting better, efficiencies will improve. I'm sure in the future we'll have more affordable ways to deliver this to the patient and creating better outcomes overall.
So, Dr. Das, I think what you mentioned about personalized healthcare, I have a genuine question about it, right? So, most of the LLMs that are being trained on the clinical side are being trained on Western data, correct?
Mm.
They are being because that's the data that's recorded, that's digital. Most data in India is still like most hospitals in India are still running on pen and paper. I know,
Yeah.
I know that transition is happening slowly and we're moving towards a digitalized
Yeah.
healthcare ecosystem. But at this point of time, most of the data that most LLM companies are using are Western, right? So, um, what do you think are going to be like challenges when those companies come out with great models? Will they be able to like? Do you think they'll be able to market to Indian markets also, yeah? Or do you think there are other challenges? Because you can the data that's used for training is from a particular data set, right? So how are you going to be able to extrapolate those gains to global markets?
Oh, by the way, this question does not only pertain to like LLMs, but any machine
Any
learning
more?
model in
Yes,
general,
for sure.
which has been trained on Western cohorts, and
Yes,
they cannot be directly applied to an Indian cohort.
right.
And I I don't know if there are any Western companies that who have marketed their AI products in India, because it's the Indian government, I'm sure will it won't pass the Indian regulations, because they would, because as far as I know, Indian regulations want you to prove its efficacy on an Indian
Right.
cohort as well.
Any country would want that, right?
Yeah,
Like because I mean,
exactly. Which means there is a lot of opportunity for Indian
exactly.
health tech industry to, as more and more of these pen and paper type systems are transforming into electronic health records, uh, there's the opportunity to utilize these uh, data and creating meaningful systems that can provide more better clinical insights than the current state of the art. There is a lot of opportunity to do that, in my opinion. Uh, and yeah, so
Right.
I think there's something over there.
I
But
think that's, yeah, go on.
yeah, but in the when it comes to data collection in India specifically, like the end customers are very pertinent to really adopting EHR systems, for instance. The reason being
Mhm.
is pen and paper for them is
Volumes.
quicker.
Volumes, yeah,
Mhm.
volumes. Volumes are a big
Volumes. How do
problem.
you maintain that fine balance, between digitalizing data in India versus also making it efficient? So a doctor does not have to spend his time on an EHR.
That's a
Is
very good
AI
question. Like, how do
is AI
you
the solution?
motivate people?
Is AI the solution for that?
I'm not sure because it's a structural problem, like what is going on, like the mentality is like what's going on, let's continue to stick to it, jo chal raha hai, chalne do type
Yeah,
mentality.
for sure.
So, but anyway, but there is a very strong focus by the government itself to, if you look at what the government has
Come
done, it
on.
has digitized many processes. So I pretty
Mhm.
sure healthcare is the next frontier for it. Lot of services, for example, even in India, like creating a startup is like you're just
It's very
submitting to a
easy.
portal and it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It has become that
very easy.
efficient. I'm very confident that the healthcare systems will also go through this rapid transformation. There's a huge benefit to it. And when this transformation happen, there will be a lot of opportunities that will emerge for uh, healthcare tech companies, to provide meaningful insights.
So to that
Players are
point,
waiting to enter.
to, I'm sorry, so to that point, what you just said, I think we're nearly out of time. Can
Yeah.
you give us three insights that you think the three biggest changes that are going to happen in this space, not just in India, in this space in general, that you feel is going to happen over the next 5 years, um, going forward?
Okay. So that's a very good question. So I think one thing that will for sure it will happen is uh, like agents which are like personal assistants to uh, like clinicians, although they have somewhat been already being implemented. So these are still like
Mm.
sort of chatbots, but now as you may have seen the recent demos from OpenAI,
Mm.
where or Google in fact, where assistants have where you can now interact and engage with them, with voice. So what that would have, that's a near-term transformation for so sure, because that can, what these agents would do is take away the complete cognitive overload of doing all these admin tasks. So you can tell these agents earlier when you would either have like a first year resident or like a nurse to do all this for a senior physician. But now you would rely on these agents to do this stuff. So that's a transformation for sure is going to happen in the near term. The next level of transformation that I possibly feel is these LLMs are being used to provide uh, clinical decision support systems. They are being used as clinical decision support systems.
Mm.
They we are still a bit further out because we are still producing, need to do these clinical studies, but this what has been published in academic journals are very encouraging, but we would need to still carry out large scale clinical studies. These models, although are now focusing on mostly text type data, but it will also uh, combine, say, visual data or imaging data or blood reports or the other type of diagnostic data, lab reports. So again, then what it would do is it would form like a more comprehensive signature of the patient, and then it can
Mm.
use the signature to deliver a very personalized clinical insight. So that is a trajectory which I mentioned is personalized medicine. It will take
Right.
us a couple of years to reach that point. But I think that there is I have complete like confidence that this will happen for sure. Like personalized medicine will happen at some point.
Yes.
more powerful.
Personalized medicine is the future. Every country is
Exactly.
focusing on that in the next 20
So
years. That's the
this is, I would say, this is somewhere like 5 to 10 years down the line where we'll
Right.
see these really powerful models,
Models.
doing personalized trajectories. Uh, and then if you talk about like really far, like 10 years down the line, what is the system, what would happen? I think some form of like AGI would emerge at some point. I
Hmm.
mean, given
what's
the
an
trends
AGI?
that we have seen, yeah. So how, yeah, probably systems probably as powerful or as even probably more powerful than humans. I'm
Then
not
human
sure how
beings.
that would look like, but there is,
It's
if you
coming.
look at the talk that is going on, that
Right.
the kind of talk that is being shared on Twitter by like, not even Twitter, like by OpenAI, Google, where
Right.
they're trying to create these more powerful systems. There is a strong like a headwind to
And they're improving
tailwind. Sorry.
logarithmically, right? They're improving like
Yeah,
logarithmically. It's getting
Yeah.
better, and
yeah,
it's accelerating in how better it gets, and how quick of a time, like
yeah.
the pace of it getting better is also accelerating. It's not just getting
Exactly.
better, it's getting better quicker.
Better and better. And so right now, if you look at GPT-4o, its abilities are mostly sort of
Unbelievable. Yeah.
cognitive reasoning, but
Oh
there's
yeah.
still a few capabilities still missing, like planning, for
Sure.
example, that kind of stuff.
Execution.
How
Action.
that will have, yeah, exactly. For now, I'm still haven't thought about these scenarios when once such strong
Those
systems
things come in.
would emerge and how this would impact healthcare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe there could be like a digital brain in a hospital, a very powerful brain which is highly efficient at resource allocation, planning, triaging, what have you, which already are like highly inefficient systems, but
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
these are able to do that. So
I feel
who
like we're
knows what will happen?
outsourcing. I feel like we're just outsourcing our brain after a point. We're just like
Exactly.
telling systems, "Ki, you do the
You be
thinking
the
for us,
CEO.
yeah, and just tell
Uh,
me what to do." And
yeah. But we don't want it to become something like Skynet, no?
exactly. Yeah, I know. I know.
But yeah, it was really a wonderful conversation,
Yeah.
Dr. Das,
Yeah.
and it was really interesting to have your insights. And we're fascinated by what we discussed, the business opportunities and the strategic
Yeah.
initiatives the government should take.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here
Thank you
today.
so
We
much.
really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to
Thank
No
you so
worries.
much.
My pleasure. It was fun talking to you. It was really
Yeah,
nice talking to you
yeah.
guys.
Thank
I
you.
hope we can
Thank
do
you.
again.
yeah,
Yes.
we're going to stop the recording now, so we can talk now.